Welcome to You Don't Know Ball. Today, we are going to be going over team previews for every team in the AFC South. If you haven't seen, we've already done previews for every team in the NFC and AFC North and the NFC and AFC West. After these two with the AFC South and the NFC South, we'll be moving on to the West. So, to get it going right away, we'll just kind of put our narrative out there for each team, kind of discuss their offseason and why we feel like this narrative kind of rings true for the team going forward this year in 2024. To start it off with the Houston Texans, our narrative is, does the offseason that the Texans had make them a real Super Bowl contender?
So I feel like, and you let me know here, Hunter, but I think it's pretty clear to at least us, the way we've been talking about it. I think it's safe to say that the Texans have officially moved themselves into Super Bowl contender range. Now, again, obviously, there's kind of two camps to it. They're either in the camp that, all right, look, the Texans made a huge jump last year. CJ Stroud showed amazing flashes, but we got to slow up. We've seen years before where QBs come in and have an amazing season, or even just when they've already had a developed career, have an anomaly of a season where they can never replicate it again. We got to pump the brakes. We haven't seen more than 1 year. And then there's the camp we're in, where it's like, all right, when a young guy is showing flashes like that CJ was showing, making those throws outside the numbers, making those clutch plays with a pretty young, inexperienced receiving core, and you add Stephon Diggs, you add all these pieces that they added this offseason, and, people come to it, Hunter, where they say, I don't know how I feel about the draft class. I don't know, maybe the draft class, not a lot of people, I should say, but it's kind of the same thing where some people don't really feel it. Some people are seeing that it's more of a long-term vision in the draft class, which is how I view it. And again, that's just kind of the reality at this point. Like, I understand why people are a little bit hesitant to say that the Texans are Super Bowl contenders. But the way I look at it, look, the league develops quickly. Things change quickly. The Texans went from being a team I had no expectations, you had no expectations for, to next year we're talking about them as Super Bowl contenders. But that's just how the league moves sometimes, and the Texans are the most recent example of that.
Well, Dobbs, I'm willing to say, like, even if they didn't do their full additions that they did this offseason with, through the draft and through free agency, I would already say they're Super Bowl contenders because we've seen how far elite quarterback play can get you. And in my opinion, if Stroud is just like a little bit better than he was last year, like, that's Super Bowl contending quarterback play. Like, the way Stroud played as a rookie was very impressive. Not to mention that DeMeco Ryans did a incredible job with the team. They go out and they add Danielle Hunter, and then they go add Stephon Diggs, whether that's on a 1-year deal, whether he stays for longer. And now you have Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. Like, that is a great receiving core. You go out and trade for Joe Mixon. Like, this offense can be one of the best offenses in the league, and the line is pretty decent too. So when you get a defensive-minded head coach that added weapons on defense, when you have a very, very, very promising up-and-coming quarterback who played at arguably an elite level last year, and add a number one receiver like Stephon Diggs, I don't understand how you can't consider them Super Bowl contenders. I'm willing to argue, even if they didn't add Diggs, they would still be Super Bowl contenders because that defense and what CJ Stroud could do and what he was doing with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Robert Woods, like, they worked with less and accomplished way more than anyone thought they could. So I think saying the Houston Texans aren't Super Bowl contenders is selling them extremely short. Is it a harder path because during the AFC? Yes. You can make the argument that the Texans could compete for the 1 seed in the North, or not the North, the AFC, I'm getting it all mixed up, the NFC right now with the 49ers. I mean, I'd be willing to place that bet where it's like they could go toe-to-toe with one of those teams, one of the top 2 teams in the NFC.
No, absolutely. And I think, you already kind of touched on it. But a big thing to me that stands out a lot when we look at the Texans depth chart now is, and again, this is kind of across the board. This isn't just, really at one position, right? We talk a lot about how having depth is such an important part of being a championship team, right? Well, we look at depth just across the board here, right? I mean, look, yes, has he been the same guy that he was at first? No. But Dameon Pierce, backup. Robert Woods, Noah Brown, John Mechie, whom we haven't even really gotten to see shine because of the early diagnosis that he got over. God willing, all that, right? And that's awesome. He's back. We haven't even gotten to see John Mechie back and is doing really anything yet. So we don't even really know what John Mechie has in the tank. So we got a backup crew: John Mechie, Noah Brown, Robert Woods as a receiving core. I mean, that's basically the Ravens starting receiving core over there in Baltimore. Hey, no shots taken, but call it how it is. I mean, that's a really talented group of backups, and we could go across the board. I mean, look, pick and choose wherever you want. They have Derek Barnett as a backup edge, Mario Edwards Jr., backup D tackle. We got Deshaun Phillips, C.J. Henderson backup, Kalen Bullock, who was their third round pick this year, if I'm not mistaken, already right as a backup. I mean, Jeff Okudah as a backup. They have names and they have depth in backup positions where they're not even needing to be out there unless their name is called due to an injury or whatever else. I mean, the Texans pretty much at this point epitomize having depth across the roster in the best way possible. So I think, to me, that's the biggest thing that stands out when we talk about them being a championship team is like, look, they're not just a team. We've already gushed for weeks now about how this team went and got the starters in place. Now, it's not only the starters. They have a whole bench unit that's ready to come in and play good football too. So this Texans team has done everything you have to do to put yourself in position to go win the Lombardi Trophy, as far as I see it.
Well, I'd also say, like, when you talk about depth, you can look at their cornerback room and, like, Derek Stingley Jr., yes, you like their safety room. They had Kamari Lassiter, who was their second-round pick. But, I think you mentioned it, like, Jeff Okudah, C.J. Henderson, like, Desmond King. They signed all these guys, and, it's almost like none of them are, like, for sure going to be good. And I'm not talking about, like, Derek Stingley or hopefully Kamari Lassiter not to be good, but the other guys that they signed, like a Jeff Okudah, it's more like, okay, we need safety depth. Let's take guys that had a lot of talent coming out and hope that they can play these positions where they're not guarding the number one receiver. You know what I'm saying? So I think that was a smart approach there, and I think overall the Texans could arguably say they had the best offseason out of any team in the league. I mean, I'm willing to say that they're at least top three. At least top three. I mean, I would say close to one, in my opinion, but I don't know how you look at this team and say that they aren't, like, Super Bowl contenders.
No, yeah. And in terms of who's made, like, the biggest leap over the last two seasons, it isn't really particularly close. The Texans have gone from, like, bottom feeder to true Super Bowl contender. So if anybody's laid out the blueprint of how to do it, GMs, go back and take a look at the Texans last 2 years. And is taking the shot on the QB and getting it right, which is more of a shot in the dark than anything, a huge part of it. Absolutely. Yeah. But, the vision has been laid out here. So, you know what? The Texans, they showed us how it's done.
And it's really crazy. If they would have took Bryce, I don't think they'd be even close to the same position. And I think the Panthers are kind of sick about that right now. But
I don't. I do think that he would be in a much better situation, but I don't. Look, the reality is you can't call anybody making that developmental jump how CJ made the first year. Just the maturity it takes. It's tough to do.